happy to have you here. And our next speaker will be sharing some information with us about commercial space. Mr. Stephen Wolfe is president and co-founder of the Beyond Earth Institute. Welcome. And un aplauso, por favor.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for coming and joining me here in this breakout room. I'm going to be talking about commercial space, and particularly the policy surrounding this. The one thought I want you to hold on to as we go through this, when we discuss commercial space, what is that about and what does that mean to you? So when we talk commerce, that's money. How do we create a livelihood for ourselves, for our community, for our nation, and ultimately the world? So the Beyond Earth Institute is interested in how we leverage commercial space so that we can do extraordinary things as we look into the future. So with that, let me share with you a brief video that describes what the Beyond Earth Institute is all about.
We have achieved great things. We have made giant leaps. We've gone far beyond what we thought was possible. But we have only just begun. Our future in space is unlimited, and it will benefit all humanity. But it will take hard work, new technologies, advanced financing models, and enabling public policy. The Beyond Earth Institute is creating a policy and legal framework to enable the creation of economically vibrant communities beyond Earth. We will engage all stakeholders on critical policy issues: property rights in space, norms of behavior, conflict resolution protocols, filling the technology gaps, exploring new financing mechanisms, and making space settlement an agreed goal of the U.S. and its allies. Beyond Earth is committed to the true purpose of why we go to space. Join us on this journey.
Okay, so in the next few minutes, I'm going to build upon what Rich Del Bella was talking about in terms of policy. So we understand that in order for us to build a space economy, it's going to require the technology capability, it's going to require financing, but good, sound policy is important. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a history, and that will begin to explain what I'm getting at. So everyone remembers the Apollo program, and at that time, what drove that activity was geopolitics, right? We understood that we needed to get there to beat the Russians, and cost did not matter. It was not about building an economy based on the moon. It was about getting there so that we could show technological prowess. But what happened when we beat the Russians, finally? That was it. We canceled the program. Even though there were many people within NASA and within the industry that were saying, no, what we did on the moon was just the beginning. We want to go further than that. We want to build that economy. And there were folks out there, so that created huge disappointment in that regard. At the same time, the United Nations was engaging in space, and Rich Del Bella talked about this. In particular, this whole idea that the United States had to supervise and oversee activities by the private actors within the country, within their country, which is very important to this whole development of commercial space. Looking historically, the interest in space, in commercial space, started to evolve really through acts of Congress. So in 1980s, there was a creation of Rich Del Bella's Department of Commerce Office of Commercial Space There was also, at the time, 1984, an act created the FAA, Office of Commercial Space Transportation. These were the seeds and the beginnings of activity, but it was interesting, this activity helped to support a budding commercial space sector, particularly launch sector. But the challenge there is, even though we had some good policies that we're overseeing, there was a huge policy gap that kept us from really, from this sector really taking off at that time, and that had to do with the shuttle. As wonderful and marvelous as the space shuttle was, it created a huge disincentive for government to look to the private sector for launch services. And so for 25 years, the government was committed to the space shuttle. Everything had to be put on the shuttle to go into space at a massive expense to the US. By the end of the space shuttle program, it was costing on the order of $1.45 billion per launch, depending upon how you measure that. It was just unsustainable ultimately. But then as we moved into, as the shuttle program began to sunset, a new kind of policy opportunity presented itself, right? Necessity created the opportunity for the success of SpaceX. As we realized that the shuttle program was coming to an end, we needed a way to get astronauts up to the International Space Station. The program, or the new launch system that NASA was developing, was too expensive and was problematic. And there were some innovative folks within NASA that said, let's turn to the private sector. Let's see what they could do. There was a trial program that said, let's invest some money into the private sector. Let's see what they can do. And that's what happened. So long story short, for an investment of $400 million into SpaceX, SpaceX developed a system that saved NASA $3.5 billion if they had produced and developed a rocket the way they had traditionally done so. And that was a tremendous game changer. And that took place, of course, SpaceX, everyone knows SpaceX. I think some of you actually saw their attempt at the Starship launch that took place a couple of weeks ago. Tremendous opportunity, completely changing things in many ways. And it's not just SpaceX. There are other launch companies, actually dozens of launch companies out there. There may be 2 or 3 or 4 that are really it's going to come down to by natural market forces. But we've really now driven the cost of getting into space by a factor of 10. If Starship works, as everyone hopes it will, that is going to also be another tremendous game changer. But that all happens because we have sound and appropriate policies that are helping to promote this. The economy of the space boom, as we've seen in the last 10 years, has been driven by 3 factors: the reduction of costs of getting things into space, the miniaturization of satellites, and advanced analytics and software, AI, machine learning, and so forth. So we have over 9,000 satellites right now. Actually, I just checked this morning. I think it's over 11,000 satellites. That has tripled in just a few years. And by the end of the decade, it's estimated that we're going to have over 60,000 satellites up there doing all kinds of things. And as Rich talked about, we talked about this morning, it's creating a challenge in terms of the sustainability of the space environment, dealing with space debris, how do we manage that traffic, and so forth. These are existential decisions that the governments of the world have to address, because what's going on here is just the beginning. Now, those of you who are interested in getting into the space domain, the Earth-facing satellite capability, the Earth observation satellites, the multispectral satellites that are answering critical or supporting critical industries like oil and gas and agribusiness and fishery and mining, all of these sectors can be tremendously impacted by the utilization of these applications. They're sort of, it's a little bit like applications on your cell phone. There really is just, this is where a $1 trillion industry is going to take place alone over the coming years, but that's really just the start. So I want to move on. Well, and what that is driving is an interest globally in space that we've never seen before. So there are space agencies that are starting in developing nations and nations that have traditionally had nothing to do with space before. It's no longer just about the superpowers that are developing space. And an exciting aspect of this is the development of spaceports around the world, right? So I wear another hat beyond Earth. I'm also the Deputy Executive Director of the Global Spaceport Alliance. We have 27 spaceport members around the world. There are some 60 spaceports that are in development or operational around the world. These numbers have gone up tremendously in recent years. And of course, we're very excited about the prospects that, and if you see right here, there's one of our newest potential spaceports. I put a star on Puerto Rico, of course. And so we're looking forward to that. This is, and the countries that are getting involved in space are doing so because they see the economic value. So they're not saying we want to do this for prestige or the pursuit of pure science. They're saying, particularly the UK, in their mission statement specifically says we're exploring space, we're engaging in space because it is an economic driver, can help the underlying value of our nation and help to build our nation. We see that here potentially in Puerto Rico as well, and that's why you should be very excited about this. You know, one nation, you look at Luxembourg, their space program consists of a fund of $500 million that they want to invest in private companies. That's their space program. So moving on, though, looking beyond the Earth-facing applications, we now want to move out. So the whole domain of space is changing dramatically from just satellites to now moving to having commercial space stations, right? So you might be aware that ISS is going to be retiring, and NASA is helping to seed the development of commercial space stations. And this is creating a tremendous opportunity, but many challenges, right? There are no such thing as commercial space stations. We've got to answer a lot of questions relating to this. You know, how do we qualify them? You know, how do we insure them? What are the ITAR issues? Like, for example, this vehicle here, this space station here, is owned by a U.S. company. They're partnering with Airbus, which is a European company, and they've also just recently signed an agreement with the European Space Agency. So these things are going to, by nature, going to be not only private but very international. And then there's also the issues of in-space assembly, manufacturing, the potential of servicing satellites on orbit. That's something new. Refueling them. And then the whole sector, there's going to be a whole new industry around how do you deal with debris, right? Debris removal alone is going to be challenging. And maybe some of that debris is going to be brought back down to Earth, but maybe some of that debris is going to stay in space as salvaged and then reused. And so this is so exciting. So we need policy that is going to help to drive these innovations in such a way that we succeed, right? So the big challenge with space stations, for example, is the ISS goes away. NASA's kind of given a little bit of money to these new commercial space stations, but they struggle a little bit. NASA's priority changes, and so they stop seeding these companies, and then they don't evolve. The challenge is that other nations are already moving in this area. That China, in particular, has very clear plans of what they want to do in terms of developing space and partnering with other nations in that regard. Moving on, I'm down to about 5 minutes here, so I'm going to go through here pretty quickly. We're looking, the next big step is going to be the cislunar environment. And now it is very nascent, but ESA, Japan, India, and of course China have designs on that. The White House, NASA, DoD are very interested in what we're doing here, and they are looking about how we can, what are the policies that we need to help to develop that sector. And the challenge is going to be, with cislunar, is that if we, ultimately the nation that is leading the way in the cislunar economy is going to lead the world economy. So this is, it's really essential for our nation and our allies to really be aggressive in this regard. The Artemis Accords is, and this is about international policy. So remember, the United Nations had passed a series of proposals. Now we're working with nations outside of the United Nations envelope in order to help us, propel us with regards to the Artemis program, which is the United States lunar program, and for other things. It's very important. And this is an agreement about how we're going to behave in space among nations. And similarly, the Hague Institute for Global Justice has initiated what they call the Washington Compact. And this is a generally agreed upon set of principles that private entities say that they will agree to as we go into space. Because it's going to be so important that there's a high degree of cooperation, even among very aggressive competitors. We want to have a safe environment so that everyone has an opportunity to develop capabilities there. And these are just some of the principles that I say that are good commercial, good commercial space policy as we move forward, as we continue to work through these issues. As Rich said, it's a highly dynamic environment right now, policy-wise. You know, so we only want to deal with issues that are absolutely necessary. We want to set clear and unambiguous ground rules so that everyone knows what they're getting into. We want these to be easy to administrate and that have limited bureaucracy. We want to serve to promote overall economic development. So it's not just about regulating things. We want to say, how are we trying to help to drive this sector? And of course, providing those all-important financial incentives, tax breaks, creation of bond funds, or creation of various economic mechanisms that will enable those who are interested to get into it and incentivize them for investors to come forward. And I think with that, I'm going to, maybe I'll just stop here, and I'm going to come back to this notion of, you know, why are we so interested in developing the commercial opportunities in space? Well, we started with the Apollo program, where we went to the moon, and it created such excitement among individuals around the world. And we weren't excited because we thought there was going to be a lot of money to be made on the moon. We were excited because we recognized that this was something new for the human family, right? And so as we want to restore this excitement about the potential for human activity in space, and we realize that it's the economic underpinning that's going to allow us to do those long-term future things in space. It could ultimately include humans making whole new branches of civilization, beyond Earth in large, this is a large space habitat. Living on the moon, or living on Mars, whether that's near term or long term, is not as important as that we have this vision and we're moving towards it. So with that, I think I'll stop there. And if we have time for a question or two, I'd be very interested in engaging in a conversation with some of you all. So yeah, we just the Beyond Earth Institute, by the way, we're at beyondearth.org. You're welcome to, please encourage you to go to the website. We've got a lot of exciting activities, papers, studies, and so forth driving this conversation.
Okay.